Tack så mycket. Jerry Axelsson heter jag och jobbar här på Filminstitutet. Jag tycker det är väldigt trevligt att det kommer såna här tekniska tankar och synpunkter från publiken. För det visar att man är genuint intresserad av vad man ser och hör. Och det tror jag kan vara en fördel när vi går in på nästa punkt. Och jag tänkte byta till engelska utav respekt för våra gäster som nu ska prata. This session will be about immersive sound. And today we have kind representatives from Barco with us and from Dolby Laboratories as well. The concept immersive sound is really a further development out of what it means to hear sound in the cinema. And during the digitization of most cinemas worldwide, and most of the discussions, as far as I'm concerned anyway, have been about the differences and the benefits of the image in the digital world. There has been very limited discussions about the sound in comparison to the image. And today, in a typical digital cinema, and with the typical standard digital film copy, which everyone plays, you still have the benefit of the discrete, multi-channel digital sound. But in a way, it's still very similar to how it was in the old days on the analog prints, which still had digital sound for the last 20 years. But there are, of course, benefits to how the digital sound on a conventional DCP. But what we will hear today is more what is beyond the traditional multi-sound experience, which most of you have heard so far. So first, we will hear Barco describe their new suggestion to this development, which is called Auro. And after we have listened to Barco for approximately 10 minutes, we will switch over to Dolby and hear about their ATMOS solution. But first, I would like to introduce Brian Claypool from Barco. Welcome. The stage is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Jerry, for having us today. So the 10 minutes that I have to occupy is not, we don't have the immersive systems installed in this auditorium, so I'll just describe the approach and the mentality that we took at Barco. The first question we always get is, Barco is a projector company and now you're doing sound. That's true. However, it was in response from exhibitors that was really asking a lot of the questions that you introduced the session with, Jerry. What is next for sound? The digital translation was rolling quite heavily. We did a series of interviews and questionnaires, and the answer that came back was it would be nice if we could do something about sound. So we came up with this concept of Auro 11.1, partnering with a company in Belgium called Auro Technologies. And essentially it is exactly that. It's 11.1 with some interesting codecs that we use on how to get these soundtracks deployed in the field. This is our processor. It's called the AP24 3D. It's a basic cinema processor. It's modeled off the data set. So we had a list of specifications that we developed, and we went through a bidding process, a competitive bidding process for various contract manufacturers, and Datasat is the one that came in and was able to meet our specifications and requirements. So it's a 16-channel input box, 24 channels of output. It has option slots in the rear of the unit to be able to upgrade the units for object-based masters as we move forward into an open standard. And it also has an upmixing engine inside of it, so you can take any of alternative content source, whether it's mono, stereo, 5.1, analog. It can mix all of those signals up into 11.1, which is a very, very good value proposition in some places around the world for sporting events, concerts, things of that nature. So at the base, that's the Auro processor. Now, some of the brief historical facts about what we've done with Auro is our first film was released in January of 2012. Stuart and I actually used to work together at Lucasfilm Limited, and we know each other very well, and we've had lots of fun chasing each other around the world. But this relationship with Lucasfilm is very good for both companies, and they wanted to jump out and try something with George's last film before it was acquired by Disney, Red Tails. It's heavily graphically created with flight elements, P-51 Mustangs, a lot of natural sounds were recorded in 11.1 for the film for it to be released, and it was released on about 10 screens. So that was really kind of the very beginning of when this stuff got kicked off. 1 year later, competitors started to enter the marketplace, and it was starting to feel like we're going to get back to the Dolby Digital, DTS, SDDS sound format wars, and NATO and UNIT kind of went, oh, hold on, guys. We need either the studios to commit to releasing all versions on all films, or make one version that plays on any system. And then a little while after that, DCI came up and said, yeah, we hear you. We need to come up with a format that's a common standard that indeed can play back on any systems that are deployed in the field. So standardizing immersive sound so that any system can play back the masters that the studios produce. And it really does need to be done in that one uniform distribution, mostly to be able to control cost, to be able to control quality, and have that ability to mix a film once and be able to play it anywhere. I think that's something that all players in the market will believe is important. Post-production budgets are not increasing. The time that you have to finalize your mixes, that's not increasing. All of those schedules and costs are getting compressed as more and more competition comes on from consumer devices and the internet, of course. We're always competing with that entertainment dollar, so budgets and schedules always get compressed. It's important that we find one workflow that satisfies all of these requirements. Of course, for the exhibitor, we want to maintain the exhibitor's freedom of choice. And in the days of DTS and Dolby Digital and SDDS, there was a choice between the systems that you could employ, but of course it wasn't one distribution. But we'd still need to enable that freedom of choice, making sure that you can do the branding that you want to do in your cinema, whether it's ours or yours is completely up to the business model of the exhibitors that we put the systems in at. Licensing fees, whenever anything is software-based or can be upgraded, there's always the danger with proprietary technologies, Auro or Atmos, that you could see upgrades be charged for in the future, because things are always evolving in this new world of digital. If you have digital cinema systems installed or you're familiar with those systems, even when DCI compliance came out, it's not like that was the final version of software that you had. There's always upgrades and improvements. Now it's immersive sound that we're focusing on. Competition, of course, we believe does provide innovation, and innovation can come quicker when there's healthy competition. And hopefully that innovation will be sped up with a unified standard, and the quality of content that gets delivered can be kept at a high level as well. Now, specifically about Auro, we have a few people that we have very close relationships with. Jeffrey Katzenberg at DreamWorks Animation is one of them. All of their upcoming films are available in Auro 11.1, including the dubbed versions. DreamWorks Animation is, of course, more of a children's type movie, so they do all of the regional language dubs in any language where we require them. The director, of course, of Turbo, these are all video clips that you can find online if you're interested in seeing their entire quote in full context. Randy Tom has been a great person to work with up at Skywalker Sound. He was the first one to take our tool sets and really work in the 11.1 workflow, which I'll get into in just a moment. And then this last quote is really at the heart of what we're trying to do with our approach on immersive sound. We want to engage the audience, we want to immerse the audience, but we don't want to knock them over the heads either. There's a lot of legislation going on around the world with trying to make people turn down the sound. And we want something that's immersive, that's engaging, but doesn't hurt, right, and not distracting. So with our approach, we try to go after that nice natural approach to immersive sound. We've done 14 confirmed titles so far in 2013. We had Catching Fire, but we didn't have time to finish the mix, unfortunately. That's why it was 15, now it's 14. But we also have a lot of regional titles as well. We're doing very well in India. Diana was, of course, a title that was produced here in Europe. Stalingrad, there was an Auro mix done out of Russia. And then for 2014, the 3 DreamWorks animated movies, a film called Oculus, and then a large format film called D-Day, The Invasion of Normandy, to commemorate the D-Day invasion and the landings, the 60th anniversary of those. There will be more titles announced as we go forward. We keep those titles up to date on our website. And in the next 2 months, we'll be able to populate our 2014 release schedule much more accurately. We have 82, 85, depending on the minute, believe it or not. We have a large deployment schedule with 2 of the largest exhibitors in the world. One was Cinemark, where they've committed to installing 157 screens over the period of about 14 months. And they do anywhere between 3 to 4 installations a week. And I'm not familiar with exactly where they are in terms of those 4 installations per week. That's why it could be 82, it could be 85. Regal is the same way. Regal is the largest exhibitor in the world. And it's interesting if you see how this is kind of shaping up. You have AMC, Regal, and Cinemark are the 3 largest exhibitors. They're American exhibitors, but they're the 3 largest. And you have Regal kind of going half-half. You have Cinemark going with Auro, and AMC is exclusively Atmos. So it's interesting in the marketplace to see how everything is going on, because the exhibitors, you can see, are also winning competition. They want choice. They want to foster this idea of an open standard. And we want to implement that open standard with our 3 distinct layers of height that we put into an Auro system. The base layer is just the 5.1. We don't touch it, we don't move it, we just make sure that it has the power capabilities to be able to pre-produce the soundtracks as they're meant to be heard. The critical layer is our second layer, which is about 30 degrees higher than the base 5.1. This is the layer that has all these nice, rich ambience and acoustical reflections that you find in real life that can give you that natural, immersive impression of sound. We do have an overhead layer, but in the Auro format, it is a mono system. And we do that simply to bridge the gap between our height channels, which are almost at the top of the ceiling on the side walls, and the ceiling, so we can move sounds above and back over to the other side. The overhead ceiling is an effects channel. There's not a whole lot of things in nature that do come from us from overhead, and as human beings, we're not sensitive to information a lot from overhead either. We're very sensitive in the horizontal plane and about 30 to 45 degrees up, and our subconscious is very critical about sounds that come from us from behind, because that's part of our genetics. We've been kind of evolved to make sure that the lion's not going to eat us from behind. So we're very acutely aware from sounds that come from behind us. But our critical layer on this second layer is what we find key to having that immersive experience. So it is an 11.1 solution. 5.1 is 5.1. And we just simply duplicate it. So whenever you have a question about the costs of implementing Auro, whatever the costs were for your 5.1 system is essentially exactly the same, because we're duplicating that layer. We're not adding subwoofers, but we are adding a few speakers in the ceiling. So really the cost component of the upgrade is exactly that of a 5.1 system. About 90% of the time, that's how it comes out when we do these installations. We do have an upgrade plan for an object-based standard when SMPTE gets done standardizing it. And it could be in 12 months, it could be 18 months, I don't know. We're standardizing based off of a solution called MDA, which is a proposal from DTS for an open standard that can be used for the foundation of object-based sound in the professional cinema industry. We have that implemented in our tool sets today, but in the end, it doesn't matter to me what SMPTE finalizes. If they finalize MDA, if they use Atmos, it doesn't matter to me. We'll implement whatever the standard is going to be. We will then upgrade the systems to a 20.1 configuration. We'll keep all of the same speakers, we'll keep all of the same amplifiers, but we'll change a wiring harness basically and add a hardware renderer to the processor so that we create zones on the walls. Rather than each speaker being its own individual feed, we'll have zones so we can reproduce the required SPL sound pressure level in the auditoriums without really having to change anything in our configuration. And if you counted all the circles and remember that you have to take out a wall whenever you draw things in PowerPoint, you would count them and see that that's 20.1. Yeah? And at that, hopefully, is my 10 minutes, 9 minutes, 45 seconds. I know it's got to be close to 10 minutes, because when I was on the train, the high-speed train from the airport to here, I was about halfway through and I was done. So
Tested yourself in advance.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So thank you again for the opportunity to join you.
Thank you very much, Brian. That was very interesting. Please try to think of as many questions as you can, because I'm sure we're going to have a few minutes after we've heard from Dolby. But now I would like to welcome Stuart Bowling from Dolby Laboratories. Welcome.
Thank you, Jerry. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to come out here today. I've just been on a pretty much round-the-world trip. I just spent a week with the Hobbit production, The Desolation of Smaug with Peter Jackson, which is just wrapped in Dolby ATMOS. And for filmmakers, it's really about having sound be able to tell their stories in a better way. So that way, you as a viewer are not just observing, that you can feel that you're part of the experience. So to kind of go through with what the Dolby ATMOS solution is, it's basically a hybrid approach. We're using channels plus objects, and what is an object? An object by definition is something that you want to isolate or have the freedom to actually move around the room. And this is used to create spatial space in the particular scenes that you're trying to portray in your feature films. This is our layout. You can see the speakers in red is your traditional either 5.1 or 7.1 layout. The additional blue speakers, we're extending the speakers further forward now, so that way we can have a full 360-degree movement of sound. We use 2 overhead arrays, the kind of pink speakers in the corner, subwoofers. We bass manage, that way we can utilize the existing speakers inside a theater and then make them full range by the use of bass management. And then we've also introduced on the green, behind the screen, left center, right center for screens that are wider than 40 feet. And that allows greater sense of imaging when anything is being panned across the screen. We continue with channels. So basically we have our standard left surround, right surround, back left, back right, but then also the 2 overheads, and that allows us to use those for ambiances. And then create those sensations. So typical surround channel, we have 1 signal being mapped across many loudspeakers, but now we have the choice of being able to individually address a speaker. That way it makes it more natural. We don't hear in 5.1, 7.1, etc. We hear sound naturally, and this allows the freedom of movement with definition and resolution that matches what's happening on the screen and allow you to recreate that sense of feeling like the audience is there and part of the story. So content creation, just kind of wanted to walk you through how you actually make an Atmos mix. There are several ways to do this. We can either do this as after the 5.1 or 7.1 mix, as is the case with Hobbit, or we can start natively, as is the case with Hunger Games that just premiered earlier this week in Atmos in LA. And then we basically create our traditional deliverables from a Dolby Atmos mix, and then also how we deal with like foreign dubs and Dolby Atmos on a DCP. So basic mixing. We use a plugin, Pro Tools being the predominant engine for the industry. It works with HD and Pro Tools 10 up. It's better obviously if you go to HDX, because that way per HDX card you get 256 voices per card versus 192 for standard Pro Tools 10 HD. The RMU kind of replaces what Dolby had as a DMU. This is basically what controls the rendering and the B chain, but also the print mastering for Dolby Atmos. And then this interconnects via MADI and Ethernet into your dub stage. So current mixing tools, we have obviously Avid, and then we're interconnected into the AMS Neve large format console, as well as Avid. Recently Harrison just announced their support, and then also the ability to talk to systems via iPad. So this kind of shows you the plugin that sits in Pro Tools. This allows you to be able to pan and place sounds anywhere in the spatial environment that you're in, and is also controllable directly from the console interface that basically controls our plugin via Pro Tools. That way, from a tactile response, the mixes still have the same look and feel. So for AMS Neve on the large format console, they have direct object control. We can also store object metadata. As we're mixing, we're basically recording positional information, XYZ as to where sounds live in space. And then also we record all of that automation information to the Pro Tools plugin. Avid System 5 is a slightly different approach. We actually have a plugin in Yukon mode that allows us to control the Atmos plugin, and that way the System 5 joysticks, again, from a tactile perspective, the mixer can still continue to use that. So if you create an Atmos after the main mix, then basically we're using a combination of stems and pre-dubs. We kind of go back through the mix and we're isolating and separating out elements that we want to have utilized as objects, that we want to be able to position or either move or be placed over or around the audience. It's also possible while we're mixing for 5.1 or 7.1 that the mixer can keep appropriate elements and then just basically highlight them in Pro Tools. With Atmos, anything we do or change is the same as it is today, except you have a Z coordinate in there, and so now in the swim lane automation you can actually go in and make edits if you want to make anything changed. For a native mix, like Hunger Games, then basically we start pre-mixing in Dolby ATMOS. We now have a local renderer which allows us to have editorial control for smaller rooms where you may have like a 9:1 environment. And that way, that allows you to cut, conform, and create your content, and then be able to take that from a small room and take that to the final dub stage, knowing that everything translates and moves just as you originally positioned it. So now you can create all your soundscapes. We can create 5.1 and 7.1 deliverables. In Atmos, we live and breathe in kind of this object-based world. But then at any given time, you can actually instantaneously see how it sounds in 7.1 or 5.1 because we're re-rendering the objects back into a traditional channel layout. So for Monsters University, as Jerry and Brian has kind of mentioned, you know, production doesn't have an infinite amount of time. Monsters University mixed natively at Skywalker in Atmos and actually saved 3 days off production. So by utilizing this particular workflow now, we're reaching the point where we can actually save time by working through this methodology and then being able to render out the 5.1 and the 7.1 deliverables. Which so far mixers have been extremely happy with in the way that it's automatically generating this, but still allows you full control over what you want to do. So for foreign language dubs, we create a traditional M&E as normal. We'll remove the dialogue stem. If you've not panned the dialogue, then it's just as simple as removing the dialogue and replacing it. If objects were, dialogue objects were used, then basically you would want to remove those objects, replace the dialogue, but then also make sure you don't delete the automation data, and then that way we don't have to regenerate anything. And then that way any foreign language dialogue track that goes in follows the same trajectory and panning that was already in place. You don't have to repan it in any way. So some of the features we've introduced is object size. We can either go from a single point source inside the room, or we can actually widen that across many speakers. The local renderer is the ability to be able to work in Atmos workflow in very small environments and then be able to translate that, as I said, to the dub stage. Conditional metadata, which now allows us to have per object and describe various parameters with regards to how you want that object to be treated in a 5.1 and 7.1 re-render. And then automated deliverables, right now everything is in real-time process, but we're working through solutions that will actually expedite that quicker than real-time, so that way print mastering can be done even quicker and simultaneously. So Atmos sits on a DCP. It sits in an auxiliary data track file. So when we finish the Atmos mix, we basically encode it as MXF on the dub stage, and then we take that and package that inside the DCP. The CPL contains a new file extension to reference the Dolby Atmos data track. And then the DCP will still contain the 5.1 or the 7.1 main audio track. We support 2448, and we'll eventually, the next year, we'll be able to support 96K workflow. So that right now we allow up to a 9.1 channel bed, plus up to an additional 118 objects that can be delivered simultaneously, and those can get rendered out up to 64 individual speaker feeds. Because every auditorium is different, then that way Atmos is scalable and can appropriately represent your mix correctly in every room around the world that is equipped with Atmos. That way, as you heard it here at a dub stage in Sweden, you would hear it the same way in a screening room in London, a theater in Tokyo, or a theater in Australia. It gives you that confidence. Atmos is currently supported by the SMPTE DCP packaging, and we have support right now from GDC. The Do-Re-Mi update is coming out for Hobbit 2. And then that way we have uniformity in the industry to be able to support this. We also have KDM key management. Our cinema processor is actually a media block, and so the Atmos data stream is actually coming off live at 150 megabits per second, and then we're re-rendering that back into the theater and applying watermarking so that way we're DCI compliant. So the DCP, we have our standard OVs, the normal method. We're currently using the Dolby's SCC 2000 to create Atmos packages, but now we also have Clipster, which is predominantly used by the industry to support this. And then also Atmos-enabled authoring systems like Clipster or the SCC 2000 can create keys that will allow playback of content in the industry. So for post-production, we have over 40 mixing stages around the world. All the major studios like Disney, Fox, Skywalker, Warner Brothers, Technicolor, etc. Also Australia, New Zealand. And then every major studio is currently supporting playback. We have 86 titles to date. This time last year, we only had 4. And we've only really been a product. We did a beta stage, and we've been a product since April of this year, and now have over 300 theatrical screens playing back content. Dolby is also working with SMPTE. We've created 3 study groups to help standardize packaging and the sync signal, and that way help move towards a standardization in the industry for open standards. And with that, I'm done.
Thank you very much, Stuart, for that informative presentation. Could I please ask Brian up here as well to join Stuart? If the audience should have any questions, feel free to ask them now.
I just wanted to ask you, if I want to hear a Dolby ATMOS mix somewhere, what would be the closest one? The closest theater?
Oh, where is Tom? Tom.
We have 4 locations in Denmark, 1 in Copenhagen. We'll have 7 locations in Norway. Currently, there's nothing in Sweden. So yeah, your Scandinavian partners, you're going to have to travel there. And of course, there's facilities in London. There's currently 4 screens in the UK.
All right, thanks. Just one more question for both of you. Is these formats, is the sound compressed in any way, or is it like a traditional DCP, totally uncompressed audio?
It's completely, for Dolby ATMOS, it's completely uncompressed. So basically, as you're aware, there's a lossless codec that we created for Blu-ray, Dolby True HD. So basically, the way ATMOS works is that we do an initial pass where we basically remove all the zeros that are in there in the PCM tracks. That takes the file size down, and then basically there's another pass done, and it's about a 2-to-1, which that way keeps it completely lossless as opposed to lossy.
The way the Auro codec works is it takes 2 to 3 of the least significant bits in a 2448 stream, and it encodes our metadata in those least significant bits that describe the waveforms that are in the height channels. During the encoding process, when you have an 11.1 print master, we encode that into 5.1. But linear PCM is our data carrier. So from that standpoint, uncompressed audio is what we use. That's our carrier, that's our format. When it goes through the theaters, the whole idea has always been if you have a decoder, the decoder will sense that metadata and play back the 11.1 version. If you don't have the decoder, you just hear 2448 5.1 audio.
Okay.
I was just curious about the concept that you talked about that's called dialogue objects. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So, have you seen The Hobbit?
Yeah.
Okay, so in The Hobbit, there's a classic scene in there, which is Riddle of the Caves, where there's interaction between Bilbo and Gollum. In the original 5.1, all the dialogue stayed on the screen. When we did the Atmos version, Peter wanted you to feel like you were in the cave. So beyond just utilizing the system to have individual water drops, ambiances, reverbs, etc., he wanted the dialogue to kind of follow the action of Bilbo. So as Bilbo's disorientated, looking to try and find out where Gollum is, in the Atmos version, his dialogue was isolated as an object and then basically moved around in the room to match where the actor was actually looking.
Okay, so when they produce a localized version in another country, then the localization will follow the original.
Exactly. Yes.
Do you think getting more speakers in the auditorium will bring back the audience to the
cinemas?
I mean, putting more speakers in is part of increasing the resolution and the fidelity. It's all about the experience. Typically, audiences don't tend to realize how sound is manipulating them, in that it's that emotional connection between you, the audience, and the story that's taking place on the screen. And that by now having immersive sound systems, then we can make that experience greater than what they can get in the home. And so certainly I would encourage any of you, through, I guess, either of our systems, go to Twitter, put in our appropriate names. You'll see a lot of feedback in there from audiences that are going out specifically to check out these experiences and what they specifically think about them. So certainly we're seeing a lot of great reaction from audiences. Brian?
Just the only good thing I would add to that is we do see the systems going in what are called PLF cinemas, premium large format cinemas. And it's all about the experience. Sound is a big part of that. The exhibitors want to use these formats as a way to be able to entice people in. But in many cases, it's not just the sound. They put the big, comfortable leather sofas in the auditorium and the push button, bring me some popcorn stuff. Those are just to make that experience something special. And immersive sound plays a critical role in that. PLF experience as it's being coined around the industry. Yeah, another acronym. We need more of those.
You have new things happening in the theaters. You have concerts and operas and everything like that.
And the whole idea is try to get things that you cannot get at home.
Yeah, I mean, especially for music, now by having greater resolution in the surrounds, then like we just did the Metallica movie, and the band was blown away by the sound experience. Before, they hated hearing music in cinemas, and now they're really amazed at what can happen.
Thank you so much. I think there's loads of questions, but you will be here around today, so
yes,
I think the audience will be free to ask questions to you too. And thank you so much for
cool. Thank you
coming
very much.
here.
Thank you.
Now,